With Nick Bosa out for the year, how good are these San Francisco 49ers? Are they good enough to contend without him? Were they good enough to contend with him? And should they go shopping? All of the options on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Coach Crocky. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Love our everydayers. Thanks for hanging out with us. And make sure you're all subbed up on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this podcast. And today's episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. All right, Croc, we both went individually. I did a little breaking news episode. You went later in the day talking about the Nick Bosa stuff and that he is now out for the year with the torn ACL. And so I want to talk a little bit more big picture about the 49ers first and figure out where this team is and if they should even go shopping. And if they should, you know, what store are they going to, right? Are the 49ers in a place to go looking for that luxury vehicle? Or are you just trying to find a beater to transport yourself from point A to point B right now? If you're the 49ers trying to get through 2025 and maybe put this thing together so that you're prime and ready to go in 2026. So as it stands right now the 49ers 3-0, the schedule playing a little bit of a role in I think the 49ers record this year. So I think the 49ers can win a lot of games and not necessarily be, quote unquote, a Super Bowl contender. Where do you see the 49ers on that spectrum? Are they a Super Bowl contender? Were they a Super Bowl contender before the Nick Bosa injury?
You know, I think most of us were kind of holding out hope and seeing what the team would look like when they're fully healthy. And at this point, I think the tough thing is it's hard to be optimistic that the 49ers are going to hold up for an entire season. You start the season and right away you lose George Kittle within, a quarter or two of the season starting. And then Juwan Jennings goes down. You already had guys like Brandon Ayuk down, and you don't know if you're going to get the best version of him. The injuries continue to pile up. Christian McCaffrey. He came into the season, he was a little banged up. And you and I, we talked about it off air. It was like, man, 77 touches for him in 3 games. Like, that's a lot for a guy that's kind of trying to hold himself together. Brock Purdy, he got banged up. So I think optimistically you would say, man, you get everybody back, you're supposed to be, this better team. And we talked about offense carrying the defense a little bit. Well, the defense has actually played well. But now that you lose Nick Bosa, that's a big blow. So how do we view this team? And I'd say that my answer is I don't know. Because I felt like if you have at least your big guns, you'll be all right. But now you can't afford to lose anyone. They have started out 3-0. You talked about it being a little bit of, the scheduling and whatnot. And I think that's going to continue throughout the season. So like you said, like 49ers, they're going to win games. Do you go out there and get someone that you feel like will be a difference maker? Maybe not even just this year, but moving forward. Or do you say, you know what? The schedule permits that the 49ers are going to win a decent amount of games as it looks right now, especially as you continue to get guys back. And you use this time to get a lot of these young guys reps. You use this time to get Mykel Williams more snaps than maybe he would have if everyone was healthy. He's going to have to grow up a little bit faster on the defensive side of the ball, but I think you take this opportunity for all of your guys, and maybe within that, you are more of a contender by the end of the season because you got guys back, you're a healthier team, maybe you're kind of hitting that stride. Then the young guys, they've gotten a lot of experience and opportunity to develop, and then, all right, come playoffs, maybe you're in a much better position than what it looks like right now as far as health goes. So it is tough. And I'm pretty sure Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, they're answering a lot of those same questions. Like, how do we view this team? But again, if they were 0-3, I would say just blow it up and play young guys. 3-0. The trade deadline is going to be a very, very key turning point for the 49ers.
Yeah, it's a big one. Timing is a big one too, as far as trades, because it takes two to tango, and you can say, "Oh, trade Hendrickson" or whatever. The other team has to be willing to dance with you to make a deal. And after 3 weeks, I think a lot of teams aren't ready to do anything, even if they've gotten off to an 0-3 start. They might not be ready to make some big calls like, "Okay, we're going to trade a player that is a starting caliber player on our football team," and so. That's a tough part of all of this. Back to the original question, I don't think the 49ers with Nick Bosa were necessarily, quote unquote, a Super Bowl contender, even though because of the schedule and because of some pleasant surprises of how quickly some guys are developing on the defensive side of the ball, I think you were optimistic that it was going to be a playoff team. And even looking at the 49ers schedule, some games down the stretch that you thought, oh man, this could be a tough game. The Houston Texans, they look bad and they're 0-3 too. So like even those games that you thought might have been tough, the schedule actually got easier the way things look for the 49ers. They've already won 2 division games. I think the best team in the division is the Rams, who come up in week 5. I think that'll probably be a big turning point after 5 weeks is sort of let's get back together, reevaluate this thing for not only the 49ers, but for a lot of teams. But what's fascinating to me is remember the Saints last year after 2 weeks. They looked good and they were putting up 40 points a game. And then all of a sudden they were the worst team in football the rest of the year. The Los Angeles Rams were the opposite. They were 1-4 after 5 weeks. They won the division. They were about ready to sell everybody. And so according to, the reports that they were basically like, okay, you sent us an offer today. We're going to trade Cooper Kupp. They didn't get the offer they liked. And then all of a sudden they started winning a whole bunch of games. And again, they went on to win the division. And I think the Rams are probably a better team this year on paper coming in than they were last year, as long as Matthew Stafford holds up. And so I think week 5 will be a big barometer. The 49ers have to beat the Jacksonville Jaguars, in week 4 first. And we're going to do that crossover. In fact, I'm going to record a little bit later today with Tony Wiggins of Locked On Jaguars and sort of turn the page from the Bosa stuff and really focus on this week, because I don't think anything major is going to happen this week. I'll talk about the minor changes I think the 49ers are going to make roster-wise this week. But when I look, Croc, at some of the – and again, so if I don't think the 49ers were necessarily a Super Bowl contender with Nick Bosa, but there was an opportunity to be pleasantly surprised throughout the season, getting everyone back and see what this team looked like. Without Nick Bosa, I think it's going to be very, very difficult, even with some of the progress the 49ers have made on the defensive side of the ball so quickly this season under Robert Saleh. But the big thing for me, and we've seen this in past seasons with the 49ers, when you go play the Buffalo Bills and the Baltimore Ravens, oh my gosh, this is like an FCS team playing against a D1 team. Like, you're good in your conference, but you go play against one of these powerhouse teams, and it's like, oh my gosh, okay, this is kind of a different animal. And I'm watching that Monday Night Football game, and I'm looking at the Lions, and I'm looking at the Ravens, even though they're 1-2. I mean, the Niners are 3-0. The Ravens are 1-2. I would 100% bet on the Ravens to beat the crap out of the 49ers if they played this week. You know what I mean? Like, that's the reality of where the 49ers are. The Packers lost to the Browns, which was somewhat shocking because the Browns looked awful the week before against those Ravens, got blown out. But I would not have the 49ers at 3-0 favorites over the 2-1 Packers if they play each other at some point this year, right? So that's you got to be realistic about where the 49ers are. They could be a playoff team and not quite be that team that's ready to go make a big push, which means if you're not ready to make that big push, if you're talking about Brian Burns and you're talking about Trey Hendrickson and you're talking about somebody else's, what they view as one of their best players and one of their star level defenders on those teams, and you're trying to pry one of those guys away if you're the 49ers, you have to give up a lot. Not only in salary, are the 49ers in that place willing to pay a player like that in the interim, and you have to give up a lot in resources in draft picks. So we'll be sitting here in the 2026 offseason and be like, oh man, that second round pick, that first round pick would have been really nice to build the rest of this 2026 roster. And you went all in on a team that wasn't quite there. So you can start throwing out names of big players you want, but if you're going to go shopping, you got to pay the price if you want that luxury vehicle. And I'm not sure that the 49ers are there, but let's go through it and let's talk about some of these, Croc, because you and I went live yesterday talking about these things separately. So let's get together on this. who do we like for the 49ers? What do you think the 49ers should do? Who are the best replacements out there? Free agents. They made a move on the practice squad as well. So what's the short-term, long-term outlook for the 49ers at that position? And should they go big to replace Nick Bosa in 2025? Next. This episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. From footwork to breath work, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings the same intention to how they craft every model. You can feel Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. And I can attest to this. I've been driving a CX-5 since 2016, and I remember test driving all these vehicles, and Mazda just felt like it was in another class of vehicle. It felt so nice to drive. It drove better. It felt nicer. The interior was better. It was just a better car, flat out. And I've loved the way this thing has performed for me, and you will too, with all-wheel drive standard too. In every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. There's nothing better driving up to Lake Tahoe. There's a little snow on the ground. You're going to go skiing, and there's people fighting chains on the side of the road. You got that all-wheel drive, and the guy controlling traffic's like, "Yep, come on through." You're like, "Thank you very much. I don't have to get out in the snow and put chains on my stinking tires with that all-wheel drive." Impossible becomes irrelevant with Mazda. Mazda, move or be moved. I want to tell the folks out there about my Doer jeans, my performance denim jeans, which are the most comfortable jeans I've ever owned. They are my everydayer jeans because they're perfect for every occasion. And I don't ever want to take them off. I'm reaching for my new favorite pants just about every single day. They fit me up with the no sweat pants too, which are awesome and super comfortable. But the Doer jeans, man, 5 times the stretch of traditional denim, and they're antibacterial. They're made with Cool Max that regulates your body temperature and wicks away moisture. And if you don't care about the technology, they just look good and they feel good. Doer combines classic jeanswear style with the kind of comfort and performance you get from athletic wear. Pioneers blending technical innovation with everyday clothing. And there's a reason why they call them the world's most comfortable jeans. They got some really comfortable shirts as well, and a new store in San Francisco. So go check them out in Hayes Valley, 567 Hayes Street. Doer just opened a brand new store, and they will get you fitted up, and a phenomenal staff there. I went to the store that weekend it opened, and man, they were busy too. Shop doer.com/lockedonsf and get 15% off with our code that is LockedOnSF. So shop Doer, DUER.com/LockedOnSF, or drop the promo code in store LockedOnSF for 15% off your first order of Doer jeans. Okay, Croc. So are you going shopping then if you are the San Francisco 49ers? And which store are you going to? Are you trying to call the Bengals about Trey Hendrickson? Are you trying to call the New York Giants about Brian Burns if you're the San Francisco 49ers? And we know that the Niners have been aggressive in the past and that John Lynch isn't shy about making those phone calls.
So the Cincinnati Bengals did something with Trey Hendrickson's contract to give him more money. So I think he's making upwards around $30 million this year. That was not originally what he was going to make. So I wonder with how that 1 year kind of, more money added to his contract would affect him potentially being traded. I think the big thing for him is if he were to be traded to a 49ers team, the thing he's been looking for is more money, is a better contract. So now you're talking about, I don't see him going to the 49ers or being traded to the 49ers to be in the same situation. Like, why would he do that? He would want more money, more years. So now you have to ask yourself, does it make sense from this standpoint, right? Like, all right, let's trade for Trey Hendrickson. We know this year 49ers are going to be better, having him, especially after losing Nick Bosa. But next year, you get Nick Bosa back. Next year, you still have Mykel Williams, a guy who plays defensive end for you that you are trying to develop in a certain way. All right. And then you have Hendrickson. I don't know how that whole thing would work together. Like Hendrickson, Bosa, and Mykel Williams are all 3 guys who I feel like should be on the field essentially every play. Like those are your starting guys. So how do those two guys work together if that's something that you want to do? So I don't think you can make that trade just for this season because it's a multi-year type thing. So then you have to look at who else is available. That could be more of a 1-year rental with the option to bring a guy back or not, kind of like they did with Emmanuel Sanders.
That's the tough thing with Hendrickson because they re-upped his contract, but it was just for the 1 year, so he'd still be a free agent next offseason. And you're not going to pay both Bosa and Hendrickson at the same time on the cap. So he would just hit free agency.
All while having a number 11 overall player who's a defensive end as well. Obviously, he slides inside, but he's a defensive end.
So you'd be paying just for the remainder of the season of basically a guy who's going to be a free agent and you're not going to resign him. And they would be asking for a lot. So is that worth? And they'd probably be asking for a first rounder. At least, at very least, you got to give up a second rounder to get Trey Hendrickson, right? And that's if things go south for those, and maybe you could start talking about, but then you get a comp pick back, and maybe that's a late third. So then you're swapping a second for a late third. Does that start to make sense? And I could buy it if you were like, okay, this is the difference between us getting a ring and not getting a ring. Then you could see why the 49ers would make a move like that and get super aggressive. But again, the Bengals are in first place right now in their division. And so they have to be willing to move their guy in Trey Hendrickson. And the price.
Are they going to stay in first place?
They probably will not stay in first place with no Joe Burrow, especially based on what they look like last week. But they are 2-1 right now, and the Ravens are 1-2, and so it's they've got an opportunity. That trade, if it did happen, wouldn't happen now. It would probably have to be after they lose a few games and they realize where they're at, and who knows, maybe the price goes down a little bit and they stop asking for a first, and maybe you can get them for that second rounder. I could see a scenario. One of the big problems for the 49ers is their whole cap strategy is they have cap space right now to add a player currently, but they want to keep that cap space and roll it over into 2026. And so their cap restraints start to change a lot because essentially they make every year's cap $30 million more than it was in reality because they roll over the previous year's cap. And that's part of their strategy. And if you take that away, now all of a sudden you're in more of a cap crunch next year. If you pay an extra player, $30 million, $20 million remaining on this year's deal, maybe they could, restructure it again and push some more back and try to get the other team to pay a little bit more. But adding a lot of salary feels like it might be a non-starter for the San Francisco 49ers, which would take a lot of players off of, off the table for them to trade for because they would be expensive for the 49ers salary cap structure. They could be expensive in, just straight up how much cash they're paying. It doesn't seem like they want to pay a lot more cash either to guys right now because of how much they're paying to a lot of star players, including Bosa, and how much you have to give up in trade. So that starts to get pretty expensive for a rental player for the 49ers. Someone like Brian Burns might be more in the long-term plans. Would that be more worth it for the 49ers? Or again, would that be something that, man, we can't do that because we're already paying too many guys and we can't pay any more high-level players. So all that said, if they were to trade for one of these teams' best players, you probably are going to have to wait anyway for those teams to go really south and get a lot closer to that trade deadline. And if I had to guess right now, I don't think they're going to make a move that costs a lot of salary and eats up a lot of their salary cap, which would eat up into next year's salary cap and change that whole equation, and spend a lot in draft capital in trade to get a guy. I would say that 49ers fans should probably stop dreaming for the Burnses and the Trey Hendricksons. It's not impossible, but right now it still feels pretty unlikely. And I think, Croc, the big thing for me is the Niners need to figure out who they are as it gets closer to the trade deadline, and the teams they be trading with need to figure out who they are. And so any of these deals would probably not happen, in the next week anyway.
I think the big thing for me, and it's a conversation that I'm not really seeing a whole lot of, is, we assume, Nick Bosa, okay, well, next year he'll be back, and that's going to be the starting DN, and he's going to be Nick Bosa, the one that we've grown to know. This is 3 ACL tears for him now, going back to high school. That's tough. I mean, just the mental wear and tear, just going over the mental hurdles of overcoming an injury, the physical, just, the training, the rehab, all of that, it is tough for him. And now, again, 3 ACL tears, that's tough, even for a guy who I feel like prepares at the highest level. But it's really unfortunate for him, especially for a guy. Like, I feel like I saw this post on Facebook, and they were talking about, oh, who is the best player out of these guys, and if healthy or when they were healthy or whatever, right, in their prime. And it was Penny Hardaway, Grant Hill, Tracy McGrady, Derrick Rose, like all phenomenal basketball players who were some of the best of, like, at one point in time in their careers. But the thing that derailed all 4 of those guys, and Rose ended up playing for a long time, but just injuries, especially like Penny Hardaway. I think it was like knees, like whatever was going on with Penny and his knees. And this younger generation will never know about how great Penny Hardaway was.
Yeah.
Like, there's a Penny Hardaway. Like, who is that? It's like, this dude had his own doll on commercials when I was growing up. And it's like, well, the injuries. And I look at Nick Bosa and it's like, well, how many times can he go through this, before we start having those conversations about, man, Nick Bosa, man, he was so great. He was so dominant. Man, he kept having those knee injuries.
God, the Penny Hardaway comp, that's a really good one. Because what he could have been in an alternate universe is, you think guys like Grant Hill too, and like he's already kind of got a legacy, but it could have gone even better for someone like that.
He was the next Michael Jordan. Like, that's how good he was.
Yeah.
And then boom, fell off, and there's there's this guy Kobe Bryant.
Yeah, never mind. We're gonna go this way. So yeah, that's another thing to consider. Would the 49ers be willing to make a move for a guy who's going to be around longer than 2025? And let's look at those. And especially, okay, so who fits the bill? Who's not going to be that expensive cap-wise that could maybe be around to be part of the plan next year if you're going to spend a little bit, but not a lot for them, who are more realistic targets for the San Francisco 49ers, if indeed these teams decide they are ready to sell one of their edge rushers. We'll get into those players next. This episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. The NFL season, it's here and it's moving fast. And FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff in week 4 with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. It makes every single game more exciting, whether you're watching your own team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. And man, FanDuel fits however you like to bet. Weekly lines, yep, they got weekly lines all the way through week 18 right now at FanDuel. Player props, building same-game parlays, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds, and not just NFL football, but every sport. It's quick and easy, and the best way to add a little bit more energy to your Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Okay, some more realistic maneuvers. One thing the 49ers have already done is they've added a player to the practice squad, and that player being a guy I'd never heard of before. I might have heard the name a time or two. Defensive end William Bradley King has been signed to the 49ers practice squad, and he was around in the preseason. He was a former 7th-round pick of the Commanders in 2021, spent some time with the Pats, spent some time with the Dolphins, and he was part of a group of players that the 49ers had in for tryouts on Tuesday. So they did sign former Baylor defensive end William Bradley King to the practice squad. And they also worked out a couple of DBs, 3 DBs, in fact, one of them being Shiloh Sanders, Dion's kid as well. So they didn't sign anybody else. So I don't know if they didn't like what they saw there and what's going on with the DB situation. Is there some more injuries that we're not even looking at because of the Bosa thing right now? But William and I already messed up his name. Yeah, William Bradley King on the practice squad. And I would imagine, Croc, that either Travis Gibson or who is it? Travis Gibson and Robert Beeler on the practice squad. Probably more likely Travis Gibson, I would think, would be the more Bosa replacement. player for the 49ers to bring up. And he had a really nice preseason for the 49ers. So that's the short-term move, which I believe they have to make a move on Thursday when things can start to become official with the suspension of, because right now they don't really have to do anything yet, but Thursday is probably when I expect to see that happen. Free agency, there's some guys still out there on the street. Clowney just signed last week with the Cowboys. Croc, what about these other names? You got Jerry Hughes, who's 37 years old. Got anything left in the tank? Shaquille Barrett, Alex Barrett, and a guy I liked a lot back in the day who has a couple of ACL injuries of his own, if I'm not mistaken, Carl Lawson.
I love me a veteran. Jerry Hughes played last year. I mean, he's just so old. I think it's a tough situation to bring in any of those guys. I think you are better off, again, developing some of your younger talent.
Yeah.
And just getting them those reps and just, hey, whatever we get. And then hopefully you strike lightning in the bottle and one of these guys end up just being really good. The chances of that, like you talked about, who do you bring up to replace Nick Bosa? Like, there is no replacing Nick Bosa, but just in the sense of replacing that player on the roster, I think you go with somebody like, even if it's a Robert Bill, like, all right, Robert Bill, yeah, we've seen you a lot around and we look at you as more of a special teamer, but here's some defensive snaps. Because off the top of my head, I don't really recall any defensive snaps from Robert Bill, a guy who's such a freak athlete, and he just may not be good. Clearly, he's just not what the 49ers are looking for. We've seen guys, even like D. Winters, who for the first couple of years, and he got more action than Robert Bill ever did. But it's just like, okay, like, he's like, no, we're going to continue to give him some opportunities. Like, they're not giving Robert Bill any opportunities for real. So there's a chance he's just not good at all. But if there was any time to get him some kind of reps and everybody would understand why you have him out there, like, it's right now.
Yeah, and one of the things he does have value is as a 6'4", 250 guy that can fly down the field on special teams too. So that might be the reason to go with him over Travis Gibson, even though, Travis Gibson probably put the better tape out there in the preseason on the defensive side. But I'm with you. This is going to be, I think, a chance for the 49ers to learn a little bit more about themselves, keep self-evaluating who they have. You bring somebody up from the practice squad. You love the development so far from Mykel Williams. A quick little stat here. Our guy, Kyle Posey, put together the pressure percentage game to game for Mykel Williams. 0% pressure percentage. He was just defending the run, and it didn't even look like he was trying to get to the quarterback in week 1. 0% win rate as a pass rusher. Week 2 jumped up a little bit. 3.4% pressure percentage and a 10% pass rush win rate in week 2. So jumped up a little bit. And then week 3, his best game yet.
Real quick, 10%. So we're saying he won 1 out of every 10 reps.
He got he won his pass rush rep 10% of the time. And it's so and if you're winning like 40% of the time, you're one of the best players in the NFL, for example.
Okay.
And then that number jumped up again in week 3, a 20.7% pass rush win percentage in week 3 and a 13.8% pressure percentage. And so whichever way you measure it, pressure percentage or win percentage as a pass rusher, those have climbed a lot. And he's making big progress as a pass rusher in each week while also being very good against the run from week 1. So that's promising as well. How much more can Mykel Williams give you from the outside as well? Could you leave him? He plays a few more snaps on the outside. You give a few more to Huff. You give a few more to Samuel Kawanu. You give some to Travis Gibson or whoever you call up. And maybe you leave Yetur Gross-Matos or Mykel Williams on the outside a little bit more, and you play the young guys in Collins and CJ West, who just has a broken finger now, CJ West. So he might not play this week. And so that's, maybe that's, it's every guy gets a little bit more, and that's how you replace Nick Bosa in the short term for sure. And maybe you find out that's good enough for the long term and we're not ready to make a big deal. But I think that's absolutely the plan for right now. You got to self-evaluate, see how this all develops, and let everybody else evaluate themselves before you're able to go to the trade market maybe in a few weeks.
Mykel Williams, I would say the cool thing there with all of that is it looks like he's progressing. And when you talk about replacing Nick Bosa, again, there's no just replacing him. But if you can see guys like, just get a little better each week, That's awesome to see. So, I mean, 0% win rate in week 1, and then to see that go up each week, I'd say that is a step definitely in the right direction. Now, how much of it is because, well, did he play, worse tackles or guards? There's that element of it as well. But that part doesn't matter. I think for a young guy, just winning reps, it builds so much confidence in them moving forward. So you just encourage him to do some of the things that they're seeing on film that's allowing him to win, him starting to understand how he has to win at the NFL level a little bit more. And then hopefully that results in this Sunday seeing him sack Trevor Lawrence a couple times.
Yeah, and look, for Mykel Williams, we always knew was going to be a projection into the future as far as his bag of pass rush moves. He didn't have a lot of that in college, and you want him to be a power player first, and you're seeing that. Gets his hands on guys, and he can just move offensive tackles back into the quarterback. So that's impressive to see already, and maybe see him build on his ability to put together some technique and some pass rush moves. And working with Nick Bosa all offseason probably will help, and hopefully Bosa can kind of be a coach on the sideline. Now that he is injured and out for the rest of the year, and still help those young guys out. I got some stats here. I'm going to bring them up a little bit later in the week about what it looks like on the 49ers defense when Bosa is on and off the field. And also, I'm going to run through real quick, Croc, because we're running out of time here right now. These are the more likely trade candidates, I think, for the 49ers. I'm going to name the names. You tell me which guy in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, the 49ers trade for of this group. And of course, you got to go to the New York Jets, who the 49ers really like to lean into familiarity. Robert Saleh knows these guys who have been on their defensive front, and he's coached these players. 2 players that potentially you could make calls about if the Jets 0-3 season continues in that vein. Former first-rounder Will McDonald and veteran Michael Clemens. So there's a couple of edge rushers the 49ers could call about on that Jets roster. The 0-3 New York Giants. I think Burns is pretty unlikely, although it would be pretty fun. How about Kayvon Thibodeaux, another former first rounder like Will McDonald, who is like kind of the odd man out and maybe the number 3 edge guy now that they drafted Abdul Carter early there. They have an extra player. Not a lot of teams have an extra guy. And so I think Kayvon Thibodeaux would be somebody that, and still on his rookie contract, would be somebody that could interest the San Francisco 49ers. That could potentially be available, and we've already seen the New York Giants make a change at quarterback as well. I think maybe the most likely guy on the trade market, Croc, is a familiar name for 49ers fans on another 0-3 roster. He wouldn't cost you a lot in salary. He wouldn't cost you hardly anything in trade. We're talking about maybe you're doing that late round pick swap, a 6th for a 7th, or a 2028 7th round pick. It shouldn't cost a lot to trade for Tennessee Titans edge rusher Arden Key. I think that would be like, you're like, oh, Trey Hendrickson, Brian Burns, and the Niners are like, no, we're going to send a 7th round pick for Arden Key. That's the move we're going to make. So that's probably the way I expect things to go, Croc. Any of those names jump out to you?
I like Arden Key. The tough thing with Arden Key is Arden Key, while he was more productive for the 49ers, like he is Mykel Williams.
Right, the outside in guy. Yeah, the Yetur Gross-Matos. He kind of played that same role, and you want a guy that could stay outside a little bit more. But it's hard to find a guy who can stay outside and be a good run defender, but also gives you that pass rush juice on the outside. And really right now, Nick Bosa as a run defender, great, but you're really trying to find that guy who can create pressure on the quarterback from the edge.
Yeah, and I just saw a stat on social media, like the 49ers haven't had an interception since, if I'm not mistaken, and I didn't fact check this, but my guy Javier Vega said the last interception the Niners had was Week 10 loss to Seattle, Isaac Yiadom, in 2024.
Yeah, I saw the same thing in Mayoko. The Niners have gone 10-plus games, 303 pass attempts without a pick. It was Week 11, Isaac Yiadom against the Seahawks.
So you're going to need same information. So you're going to need a guy that's going to put some kind of pressure on to force those errant throws. Guys are just a little bit too comfortable back there.
That was 10 months. That was almost a calendar year ago since the Niners have had an interception. 10 months
That's
ago.
pretty wild. That's pretty wild.
All right, let us know what you think. Which name should the 49ers go for? There's a few other names that could be available out there, but you're probably looking at some of those 0-3 rosters right now if you're salivating at a team that might go into sell mode, and the Niners add an edge rusher. Week 4 crossover episode, and then our keys to victory. Croc and I will be back, and I've got some more stats of what the 49ers really need to make up for with the loss of Nick Bosa and other keys to beat those Jaguars in week 4 coming up on Locked On 49ers.